Today we are here at the end of Summer Learning 2025, and we're here to talk about our state summer learning, our final reporting task, and we're going to provide an overview for you. Please don't hesitate to drop questions in the chat. I'm joined here by my colleagues Savannah Solario and Catherine McDonald, Kat. And they'll be participating today and monitoring the chat. So don't hesitate to stop us, and we'll try to do our best to capture all your questions and get them answered today. So let's go to the next slide. So our goal is by the end of this presentation that all of our participants will have a clear understanding of the State Summer Learning final report form and our reporting requirements. You'll learn the due dates, how to access support and get your questions answered. Also, we're going to give you an update on 2026 grants and the work we've been doing with rulemaking. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide tells the story of summer learning in Oregon since 2021 through 2025 this year, and you all experienced this firsthand. If you look at that gray bar, it has this uncertainty, and legislation has historically been passed late April. ODE had a matter of days and weeks to turn grants around, and then all of you had a few weeks to stand up these summer programs. House Bill 2007 came with a lot of new borders and a lot of new requirements. And then you had to do all the things, right? Planning, get curriculum aligned, hire staff, arrange for transportation, arrange for meals, arrange for all of it. I often equate it to building Rome in a day. And then in 3 weeks, it ends. And then we enter that cycle of uncertainty. And our goal has been to get out of this crazy making cycle of boom bust funding and provide some stability. So we're hoping that we're entering into this next phase. So let's go to the next slide. So, and thanks to you, Oregon educators, all of you in this room today rose to the occasion yet again. I mean, thinking through the pandemic, ongoing, just some snapshots that we took from some site visits this summer, and it did not disappoint. We are truly humbled and inspired by your leadership and your efforts and your focus on students and families. And despite the timeline, despite the uncertainty, that each and every time you have rose to the occasion, and these faces are just a testament to all of that work and effort. And we know it is a lot of work and effort. And we just want to start this presentation today with a huge gratitude to you and all the work that you do. Let's go on to the next slide. So many of you might not have realized how the grants ended up for summer 2025. We ended up with 139 grantees. 139. We had 66 grantees in 2024, just for comparison. And so we had broad reach all across Oregon. You can see the district grants highlighted in blue on the Oregon map. You can see our ESD grants highlighted in green. We had charter school grants highlighted in pink. And then you can see also for the first time, our tribal nations had grants too. So we had 105 school districts, 13 charter schools, 15 ESDs, and 6 tribal nations. And not only that, all of you have been expanding impact through partnerships with community-based organizations, nonprofits, local governments, and business. So wow, that's a lot. And that's some big impact all across our state. And again, thank you. $35 million investment. Next year, we're looking at another $35 million investment thanks to House Bill 2007. We're going to get out of the cycle of boom bust and have multi-year grants going forward. And you'll learn more about that at the end of the session today. So let's go to the next slide. So now with that, why we're all here today is to learn about the end of program reporting. So with that, I'll pass the baton to my colleague, Savannah Solario. Savannah.
Thank you, Raquel. And just to respond to one question in the chat, I could definitely make it with just county borders and district names, if you'd like. Feel free to send us an email to the Summer Learning Inbox and we can follow up with a link to that map. So as far as the final report form goes, we just wanted to go over one really important aspect, that this final report form does collect SSIDs and student information. So please make sure that when you submit the form to us, you do not submit it just as a plain email attachment. We will have two options for you, two secure options for submitting, which would be either a secure Smartsheet submission, which will be coming soon. I'm just waiting on a license and we'll get that set up. And that link will be shared to the State Summer Learning Grant webpage, as well as out in an email to all of you. So you have access to that. And in the meantime, you can use the our ODE secure file transfer as well to submit your reports to us. And this is just a quick overview of, or a quick screen cap of the report form, which is linked on our webpage. And I'm going to switch my screen share and we'll just do a live walkthrough of the report form. Give me just a second here to get that pulled up. Okay. And so is everyone able to see there? Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to start off with saying that the form probably looks a little bit overwhelming and looks a little complex. I promise you, it is not that bad. It is actually really easy and really simple. A lot of the red highlights and all of those things are really just meant to be tools to help you all make sure that you answer all the things that you need to answer and you get all the things checked off. Which to that point, the first tab that you'll see when you open up the form is our completion checklist, which basically will automatically update as you go through and fill out the rest of the tabs. And this is just a tool to help you make sure that you've got everything filled in as much as it needs to be before you're ready to submit. And so you can see along down here at the bottom that we have 7 sections of the report. And so we'll go to the program reach section, which is section 1. And essentially this is where you'll just enter in your entity ID, which is just your ODE district or school or ESD ID, and then contact name and email for whoever's completing the form. And then the first thing that we'll ask is the total number of students served by grade level. And please keep in mind that this is the grade level each student will be entering into the 25-26 school year. And so in that case, any of your incoming kinders or doing kinder transition programs would be counted as incoming kinder kids. And then we also have a 2 categories for grade 12 to account for those that are incoming grade 12 and those who are graduating or outgoing grade 12. So we can capture all of those students. As well, if you have offered a high school credit recovery program, we ask that you'll just select yes in this cell right here, and then fill in the number of credits earned by subject area. And to Katie's question, do we count everyone even if we only came 1 or 2 days? Yes, we would like for you to still count them, and then I will speak to that a little bit more when we get to the SSIDs tab on how to account for them on that tab. But yes, please do include all students served. We also ask about partnerships. So in this section, you can just enter in the number of each type of partnership that you had and then list their names in the cell over here. And we also have the other category just in case any of these categories don't quite fit whatever your partner is. And please do report on all of your partnerships, and that could include, you know, public libraries. That could include even if you took your kids to a field trip to Enchanted Forest and you had, you know, them do some tours and do some learning there. That could be a partnership too that you could record. We really want to know about all the different partnerships and community involvement that happen as part of the grant. And then the last section on this, or last part on this section is staff development, or staff professional development and training. So in this case, even, so you can just say yes or no, you provided PD or training. And then if you did, you can just enter in the number of each type of staff. There's also another category. If you do want to record other staff, if you could also fill in the description to say what type of staff that was. And then just a really, really brief high level summary of what the professional development or trainings that were provided were and what the staff were expected to learn or gain from those. And then moving on to section 2, which is your academic growth section. This should look very familiar as it is exactly the same table that you saw in your original applications. And hopefully this will be easy to fill out because you should be able to just copy and paste your goals from your original application. And so that will fill in all of the columns from here all the way to your instructional plan and evidence-based strategies. And then the new part for this table is now you're going to also put in your measured outcomes that we talked about at the beginning of the summer. And you're going to basically say what your data told you and restate your goal using your actual measurements. We did add a couple of new columns to this, basically just a self-assessment of, do you think this goal was met? And we have options of completely, mostly, partially, or not at all, depending on how things went. And then we did also add a notes section. So if you wanted to speak to, say, maybe you said you mostly met your goal and you wanted to speak to a specific reason for that, maybe you had to, you know, close your program a couple of days over the summer because of heat, and maybe you had less time to do your programming than you originally anticipated. That could be a potential reason as to why your goal wasn't quite met, or any other information that you want to provide there, you can provide in that cell. And then for the goals, we technically should have at least one literacy goal or language arts goal for each grade band served. And those all should have been in your applications or your supplemental applications for your academic goals form. And so it'll be just those same goals that you set at the beginning of the summer that we're just reporting out on. For next tab, programs offered. This is going to look somewhat similar to, again, the application form. And for this section, we have a total of 6 potential programs for you to fill out. And we know that some of you maybe provided what you would consider to be more than 6 programs. We're asking for you to please consolidate your programs by grade band or by any other way that makes sense. So let's say you offered a Jumpstart Kinder program or a kindergarten transition program at 5 different elementary schools. We ask that you would combine all of that data and record that as one program, one kinder transition program, and then just list the site names that you held that program at. Unless they're substantially different, then you can use 2 program slots for that. But we're just for ease of data compilation, we're asking to please stay within the 6 program slots that we have here. And for here, we'll just go through. We do ask that you give your program a name. Even if you don't have an official program name, that's fine. You could just put in the grade level. So it's an elementary program or it's a high school program or middle school program. But this field must be filled in for each program that you're reporting on because it will be used in the next tab. And again, just list the sites that those programs were held. We're also asking for a total number of staff by type, just the total number of FTEs for each program. And then in here, we're asking you to just indicate which grade levels were served. So you don't have to enter in the specific number of students per grade level, just a yes or no, either you served kindergarten or you didn't, or you served, first through fifth grade or you didn't. And instead of having to select no on each individual one of these, if you select yes on like one or two, you can leave the rest to just say select. That's fine. You don't have to spend all of your time, going through and hand selecting those. Or you could also say, just, copy your no and then just scroll down and just say paste that right there. And that way that just fills in the rest of the section. That way. So yeah, but don't worry if you don't want to go through and click no or yes on every single or no on every single cell, that's fine. You can just leave them as the placeholder text. And then down here, we do ask for the total number of students served in that particular program. And then we ask for your program duration, so your start date and your end date. And again, if you had, 5 different kinder transition programs at 5 different elementary schools, and they, varied by a few days, go ahead and just use the, earliest start date, latest end date. Or if you want to just average them out and say roughly, they were all 4 weeks, but maybe they were all 2 weeks, but maybe they were at different times, you can just put in a 2-week period there, just to kind of show the overall length of the program. And then the total number of hours of programming within that program. And then this section is a little bit new for those of you who did this report form last year. And basically this is in response to our to House Bill 2007 statute, where it requires very specific reporting requirements. And one of those requirements is that grantees report out on the number of hours per activity type. And to try and make that as least painful as possible for you all, we're trying to align this with the schedules supplemental application form that we had you all fill out at the beginning of the summer. So you might recognize the categories for that were academic instruction literacy specific. There was academic instruction other or general. So maybe you're doing math, maybe you're doing science, maybe you're doing credit recovery or any other type of general academic instruction. We also had a category for enrichment or youth development. And then for something that was maybe a mixture of both academics and enrichment. So maybe you had a slot of time where students could choose from a list of activities. And some of those activities might have been STEM based. So those were a little bit more academic based, or some of them might have been an arts activity, which would be more in the enrichment category. So then that's why we add the category where it just says both. So you can just say it's a little bit of both. Students have a choice, or it has both aspects in the activity. And then other for things like recess or lunch or breakfast or arrival times or parent pickup times, or just kind of times where you're not really in structured programming throughout the day. And so we do ask that you do your best to enter in the rough number of hours for each of these activity types for the program. And it's okay if it's not a 100% perfect exact to the minute hour count, that's fine. It's fine if you just have to kind of estimate and say, well, okay, we know that we did programming 4 days a week and we did about first half of the day was academics. So I'm going to say, there's about that many hours there and just kind of ballpark it. That's fine. This will autofill the total number of hours of programming that you enter in for all of these activities here. And if this number does not match what you entered right above here, this cell will highlight in red. Or it will turn green if it does match. So it's fine if you need to estimate, but we do prefer that these two numbers still match. So however you estimate within these categories, please make sure that they do equal the total number of program hours that you actually provided. And here we just ask, did you provide meals and snacks? And did you provide transportation to and from your program site? And then do pay attention to the definitions down here for the section for accommodations and modifications provided to students experiencing disabilities, as we have changed them slightly. And I'm hoping that it'll make it a little bit easier for you all to fill out, but instead of asking perhaps for special design instruction, instead of asking the number of activities that were modified, we're just asking for the number of students experiencing disabilities that were offered activities or modified activities to meet their needs. So do read the definitions and make sure that you are entering in the appropriate numbers for each of these. But then just, enter in your number here. And again, if you didn't do one of these, or you maybe didn't have any nurses for your kiddos, that's fine. You can just leave it with the placeholder text, enter number, or you can enter 0. Either way is totally fine. And then there is a example section over here on the right-hand side where it just kind of goes through a potential example of different program levels, what this might look like when it's all filled out. And then going on to the activities offered tab. So this is where we ask where you put a program name in here. And even if you don't have an official program name, just to put something here, because what will happen is these headers here will autofill based on what you enter in on that previous tab for each of the 6 programs. And then you'll be able to go through and say your first one is a kinder transition program, then that would autofill right here. And you'd be able to say, great, for your kinder transition program, which activity did you offer? And this is just a very simple yes, no drop down for each of these. And again, you don't have to select no on every single activity you didn't offer. It's fine if you want to leave the placeholder text. But do select yes on the ones you did offer. And there is a rather long list, but they do all have descriptions. So you can kind of go through there and see and just select yes to all the different activities that were included within that program. And then on the 5th tab, this is where the narrative questions are at. And this is just alignment with grant goals. And we have 4 narrative questions. And we do recommend that responses be around 250 words or less. So these do not need to be super detailed, involved, novel-length narratives. Just, a high-level overview with the main points to answer the question is perfectly sufficient. Of course, you can go over 250 words if you want to, but 250 words or less is perfectly fine. And so the biggest, probably the most complex question is this first one here about infusing literacy development within enrichment activities. And so it does have a couple different parts to the question. Then we also have one that asks about what literacy curriculum you used this summer and whether or not it aligns with the school year curriculum that you use. And also, what was your experience with the curriculum? Is it something you used before? Is it something that you would use again in future summer programs? Were there things about it that didn't quite work for you or things that were really, really great? Our goal is to collect this information both for legislative reporting and also to be able to share back out to all of you as grantees so that you guys can kind of see what each other did, like what other curriculum might be out there. Maybe you haven't heard of this curriculum, that curriculum, or maybe you didn't like your curriculum and you're looking for a better curriculum for summer programming. So we'll be able to provide that information back to you all as well to hopefully help you for your future planning. And then we have the same 2 questions that were included in the application form about serving students experiencing disabilities and culturally and linguistically responsive approaches. And then that is it for the narrative questions. It's just those 4. And then the next tab is the participant SSIDs tab. For those of you who were grantees last year, you might remember that we had this broken out by K through 8 and 9 through 12. This year, we're asking to put all students on the same tab just to make things a little bit easier and not have to worry about that, how do you count the 8th graders, whether they, did credit recovery or whether they did enrichment programming. So you can throw them all on the same tab. And here's where we do need their ODE assigned secure student identifier, which is typically a 7 to 8 digit number. Some of them might be a 6-digit number for your for some of the older high school kiddos, but typically this is a 7 to 8 digit number. Please do not put in the school or district assigned student ID, which is typically around 6 digits. Because we use this data to pull demographic information of your students so that we don't have to ask you to provide that information directly. Since you guys already provide that through your school year data collections, we can use that SSID information and pull that data on your behalf. So that's less work you all have to do. So please do make sure that if you have your SSIDs that you're using the ODE SSIDs, not their school or district assigned student IDs. If you did serve students who you don't have SSIDs for, maybe they were homeschool students, or maybe they were from a different district, or whatever it might be that you don't have an SSID for them, that's fine. We ask that you then provide their last name, first name, and date of birth instead. And that helps us to also match students that we might have already in our system, and to help get that demographic data for them. And as well, if you do have SSIDs, it's great if you also have their last name, first name, and date of birth to include. We'd love if you wanted to include that information as well. If you don't already have that information altogether, that's fine. Just the SSID is the minimum requirement. And then you have the two columns, next two columns are number of hours attended and number of credits earned. So for the number of hours attended column, this would be used for any students that attended programs that were not credit recovery programs. So all of your enrichment or your basically all of your K through 8 programming, or if you had like a high school enrichment programming, then you'd want to know how many hours each student attended that programming. If you had a credit recovery program, then please do enter the number of credits earned by each student. And if a student participated in a credit recovery program, maybe they showed up, they did some work, but they didn't quite earn a credit, please do still enter a 0 for them, just so that we can see that they were in a credit recovery program and they just maybe didn't actually earn any credits, and that's fine. And you don't have to report the number of hours attended for students in credit recovery programs. So if you have that information, you want to report it, that's great. Feel free to report both. But at minimum, we need one of these columns filled in. And then the next column, the name of programs attended. This is not a strictly required column. So if this is a level of information that you just don't have put together, and it's going to be a lot of extra work to try and crosswalk which kids, which SSIDs attended which programs, that is fine. Leave it blank. It's totally okay. If you do have that information, or it is easy to put that information in as you're putting in SSIDs, like if you track them per program, we'd really appreciate if you did put that information in, as it just kind of helps us to organize data and track some of the students that maybe attended multiple programs. And then if you want to use the program name that you put in on the on section 3 on the programs offered, if you just use the same program names here, then you can just enter that in here. And then we also have a notes field in case you have any additional information, such as this is a homeschool student, or maybe this student only attended 1 or 2 days. So maybe they only attended, 5 hours of programming. And as far as the hours of programming attended, this is a rough estimate. It by no means do we expect that you have actually calculated out like specific hours every single student was attending. If you know that a student attended, a certain number of days of programming overall, then you can do the math and say, okay, great. That means that they roughly attended this many hours of programming. If they left halfway through the day and you have that information and you want to adjust for that, great. If not, that's fine. Just say roughly by number of days, and that translates to this many hours. It does not have to be 100% exact. We're just trying to kind of get a ballpark feel to see, how much of the programming students were participating in. And for the number of credits earned, preferably reported in 0.25 credit increments, but whatever you have is great for that one. And then the last tab, the success stories, is really they're just 2 optional questions. These are by no means required. They're just some questions that we like to ask. Just what highlights did you have, or positive experiences did you have in your summer programs? This could be feedback from staff or students, enjoyable activities or field trips, or anything that went really well for you. We'd love to hear about it. We'd love to be able to share these stories with the legislature and with stakeholders as a whole. So feel free to share anything that you were proud of, or just that you enjoyed, or just any highlights you had throughout the summer. And then the other question is just about, were there any strategies or practices that you found to be really successful or helpful? It might be you overcame some transportation barriers, or you found a creative way to deal with some staffing barriers, or you had some really, really effective family engagement strategies, or anything of that sort. feel free to share that here. And again, this information would be given back out to all of you so you guys can still share and see what everyone else did and kind of, maybe learn from each other and just kind of see what happened in other programs. But again, these two are completely optional. They are not required. So if you don't fill them out, that is absolutely fine. And then the last tab is just, this was the same tab that was included in the academic goals supplemental application form. Basically, it just goes over what should be in each column for the goals and a couple of examples. And this time it has the measured outcomes as well. So you can see kind of what we're looking for as far as the measured outcome responses. And also, in case you need them, down at the bottom of this tab, there is a list of definitions for each of the different performance measures. So that was a really quick, really high level overview. And I see that there are quite a few questions in the chat, which I will go through and answer now.
Yep, and I can help you, Savannah. So I
Thank
think I'll
you.
start at the top and try to capture all of the ones that we didn't get to. So kudos on the cool map. Thanks, David, for that. Rachel asked if we missed the student voice survey date, is it still possible to give it? Will this cause a large issue with the final reporting?
I believe the survey is still open until the end of this month. So until September 30th. So if you have not yet given the student survey and you have an opportunity to do so, feel free to go ahead and do that. It will not cause any issues with our final reporting. It would just be more helpful data. So feel free to do that if you haven't already.
The next is around phase 2 funds loaded into EAGM. So there's lots of questions about this, Savannah.
Yes. So phase 2 funds, we are moving forward as quickly as we can. We have a slight delay due to the need as an agency to do our 2025-27 biennium legislatively approved budget reconciliation, which can be a kind of lengthy process. And so there was a hold on processing all subgrants until that had been completed. But we were able to get our particular grant pushed through since you all have, been incurring these expenses, your programs are pretty much over, you're all ready to claim your funds. And so that has been sent now to the EAGMS team to build out those subgrants. And I believe that they should be able to do that within the next week or two to get those built out and loaded in EAGMS. And just as a reminder, any of your unspent phase 1 funds will be included in those phase 2 subgrants. So you'll still have access to your entire grant amount. So you won't have lost any money.
And also deep appreciation. Not only did our funds come out later than they have in past years, but we also had to navigate crossing a biennium with funds.
Yep.
So we really appreciate all of your flexibility and your patience as we cross a biennium mid-programming. So. Okay, the next question, if an ESD provided pass-through funding for a district, in addition to our own internal programming, should we include them in our ESD final report just as we did in the application, or should we fill out an individual report for that district?
That's a fantastic question. And there's a little bit of a nuanced answer to that. So for an ESD who did some kind of like pass-through funding of a district that was not an individual recipient, we do ask that you do include them in your final report as they were part of your application. That was part of the programming that you were providing, even if you weren't providing it directly. So please do include their data. If your ESD was passing through some funding to a district that was also a direct grantee, in that case, you do not need to include your district's information in your final reporting since they will also be submitting their own final report directly. So then you can just report on what the ESD did for programming. And if you're an ESD who was solely doing pass-through funding and just support for districts, and you did not provide programming directly, and your districts were direct grantees, you do not need to fill out the final report. Only those district grantees would need to fill those out individually and then submit them to us, and that way we would get all of that data.
Okay. Hopefully that captured your question. And reach out. If not, we can provide further clarification. From Katie, do we count everyone, even if they only came, I think we already answered this one, but it's worth repeating, even if they only came 1 or 2 days?
Yes, please do count them as a student served. And then in that SSIDs tab, in the number of hours attended, just enter in, the 1 or 2 days of programming that they actually did attend.
And there were some questions with turnover in the summer, or just wanting to tap into the application that was submitted. Kat is capturing all of those emails in the chat. So if you drop your email in the chat and for some reason can't locate that application, we're happy to send it to you. So reach out to us via email or just drop it right here in the chat. Katie says some of our students didn't complete end of program assessments due to absences. Can we just report on the ones that we have? Yes, absolutely, Katie. Absolutely. We know those things happen.
And that's also where you might want to say, make a note in that notes section here to say something about, hey, we had a certain percentage or a certain number of students who did not do their end of program assessment. So this data is based on this percentage of the students served or something to that effect, if you wanted to include that information.
Yeah. Jesse asks if we did a program for grade levels that weren't in the original application, should we include in this report? Yes.
Yes, please. And we fully expect that your programs have shifted from what you submit in your applications, and that is totally fine. But please do report on what you actually provided, whether it aligns perfectly with your application or not.
Yeah, Tracy, good comment about why the goals and standards that we already filled out can't be transferred. Yes, we're hoping with ongoing multi-year funding that we can better support that effort in the future. But the way that the fast-moving train went this summer and crossing a biennium, we tried to cut corners for you as best we could, but really great suggestion.
Yeah, and also just the large scale, we went from 66 grantees last year to 139 this year. And that would have been, if we were to do that, that would have meant that we would have had to fill out individually 139 different templates for you all. And so that is why we weren't able to do that this year. But thank you for the question, and we do hope to make that easier for you in the future, for sure.
A question about Google Sheets and do they need to use Excel?
That is a great question. Because this form will collect student data, we ask that you not upload it to Google. Please do fill it out as an Excel sheet in Excel and submit it that way. There's also sheet protections and conditional formatting and things that are part of the form that get wiped out when you upload it to Google, and it makes the form not quite function the way that it was intended. So if you wanted to say that you do want to collaborate on it, on not the SSID part, but on the other parts of the form, and you want to upload a version to Google Sheets for internal collaboration purposes, that's fine. You can do that. We just ask that you then copy and paste your responses into a clean Excel file and then submit the Excel file to us as your final report.
There's a couple of questions on staffing. Do you want the FTE for the staff's regular time or just the FTE they spent on the summer program? Summer programming.
Yes, please, and
Yeah.
thank you.
Or if they were doing planning around summer programming, you can include that time, but we're really looking at the staffing associated to the summer program. Do you want staffing reported in FTE or number of staff members? So for example, they had 2.5 paras. Do you want that reported as 1 FTE or 2?
For consistency's sake, report that as 1 FTE. So we are going for FTEs rather than number of staff members.
Great question. And if our program was not a full day, how do we record that?
I'm actually gonna let you answer that one, Raquel, as that's
Yeah.
a little bit more outside my wheelhouse as far as FTE
Yeah,
reporting
no, I don't
goes.
think that one was really about maybe, and Katie, jump in if we're misinterpreting the question. Um, it, in the application, you submitted schedules, so you could denote, the time when the schedule happened. But instead of having you re-verify the schedule, we received a bunch of different formatting with that. We decided to have you enter the hours instead. So I think you can account for that with reporting hours. So correct me if I'm wrong, Savannah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had a varied schedule week to week, or you had, maybe you did full days, 3 days a week, and you did a half day on the fourth day a week, that's fine. We just want the total number of hours and then just the start date and the end date of the program.
Okay. And then Savannah, there are questions around, and Katie, jump in if we didn't get that right. Uh, what about credit recovery? Could you review? There was a couple things about credit
Mhm.
recovery and credit attainment. If you could help clarify that. And I think Jeff, credit recovery is typically a group of students working on many different course types.
Mhm.
So make your best judgment when you're, I'll let Savannah, she can answer this better than I can.
Yeah, so for that, for credit recovery specifically, we just ask that you uh, fill in just the total number of credits earned by all students by subject. And then for activities offered, there is actually a credit recovery and attainment activity. So you could just say for a credit recovery program, just select yes for this cell because it was just credit recovery. And then, of course, if you did other additional activities, you can answer for those as well. And then for the SSIDs, again, you would just enter in the total number of credits the student earned, regardless of what subject they earned them in, just the total number of students they earned, or sorry, total number of credits that they earned through the programming. And again, feel free to come off mute or respond back in the chat if that's not quite what you're asking.
Yeah, it was more on the tab that talked about if it was a literacy program or not a literacy program or an enrichment program. When it's credit recovery, you've got, yeah, some of the kids are working on English
Oh,
class,
yep.
but some of the kids are working on lots of other things too.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Put them in the academic instruction other, because that's kind of what we're using as that catch-all. So if you yeah, so for for high school credit recovery programs, it's fine if all of your hours are in the academic instruction other and you don't have specific literacy hours for that. Um, because we understand that that was a mix of different subjects that they might have been uh, participating in.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. For instructional aids, do we want to count of IAs with special ed, specific rules, or IAs involved in modifications and accommodations? Oh, great question, Natalie.
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. For this particular section down here for students experiencing disabilities, please do include both. So if you had an IA related to providing services or extra support for students experiencing disabilities, go ahead and count them in that category.
Another area where you could add information to tell the full story is in the narrative section when it describes serving students experiencing disabilities. That'd be another great area to capture that. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. What if it was credit attainment? So Amy, hopefully we answered that question for you.
Yeah, and I would say for credit attainment, like if you had a ninth grade counts program and maybe you have some incoming ninth graders that were able to earn some early credits, you can go ahead and record them as credits earned here, and then also record the number of hours that they attended the programming. And that will be kind of our that'll make it a little bit easier for us to see, okay, great. So that was probably a ninth grade accounts program. They did some credit attainment, which is fantastic. But the focus of the programs should have been credit recovery. But please do go ahead and report those credits attained as well in your reporting.
What about college credits? Because some kids did concurrent. We offered some things that were concurrent high school and college.
I would say
They were our partner.
I would say put in the number of high school credits earned in this cell for that student, and then in the notes, go ahead and add the number of college credits that they earned, and that way we'll be able to differentiate between the two.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Amy. We'd love to tell that story. Thank you. Okay. This is from Tanya. If we served students outside of our ESD service area, but in Oregon, do we include those as well in the SSID section?
Yes. Any SSIDs that you have for any students that you served, please report them, whether or not they are directly within your ESD or your district. And again, if you don't have an SSID for them, that's fine. If you could just then provide their last name, first name, date of birth, so that we can try and match them in our system and get that demographic data.
Okay. Brenda, will the grant reimbursement request form be sent in a separate email?
The reimbursement request form is currently posted on our webpage and has been sent out. And so it's going to be the same reimbursement request form as we use for phase 1. So.
Yeah. And then Carla, when will we get the results of the summer survey? Yep. Do you want to go ahead, Savannah?
Yeah, for individual results, if you would like your results, please send us an email to the summer learning email address and specifically requesting your results, and we will get those prepared and sent off to you. We're not preemptively sending them out to everybody, so it is on a request basis. So if you do want that data, feel free to send us an email and we will get that out to you.
Kayla, if we conducted the SEED survey via paper, are we still able to turn those in manually submitting via the code?
Yes. So if you had SEED surveys you did via paper, you would have to have someone hand enter in those responses using the actual survey form so that they are digitally recorded.
Yeah. And Katie asked, can we use leftover funds from this year for next year?
So this is actually the very first time that we're able to say that, yes, you can actually do a little bit of pre-planning with these funds within reason. So, and we will touch on this here shortly, but 2026 grants will be a completely new grant cycle. So those of you who have received grants this year may or may not receive grants next year. That said, though, if you have some leftover funds and you know that there's some pre-planning you can do now, maybe you needed to order some extra curriculum or some extra supplies to either replenish what you use this summer or you know you're going to need them for next summer, that is fine. Do keep in mind that the last date to expend funds for the grant is October 17th of this year. So as long as you get those expenditures in by then, that's great. And if you wanted to maybe do some staff planning time to either recap on, lessons learned for what happened this summer and do some forward thinking for next summer, you can also record that in there as well and record reimbursement for that.
Okay. Lisa, about we did not have time to spend phase 1 and are waiting for phase 2, so we can request funds. Last email I received said agreements would not go out until October. I'm going to clarify that a little bit, Savannah.
Yeah, so we're working on getting those phase 2 subgrants out as quickly as possible. I'm hopeful that the AGAMS team will be able to get those loaded within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's not contingent on a grant agreement. Your grant agreement should be, and correct me if I'm wrong.
All grant agreements have been
done.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So it's more about crossing the biennium and getting that loaded into EGAMS is the holdup on that. It's not a grant agreement thing. Okay. Let's see, we're getting closer and okay, keep coming. So if your district provided lunch for our school, so if our district provided lunch for our school, but they are claiming us on their grant, would we need to indicate them as a partner? Yes. I don't think you would need to claim a partnership with nutritional services. It certainly is a partnership as how you're serving meals. There's a place where you can indicate if meals were served. So I think it's adequate to just name it right there.
And if you did want to name them as a partner, that's fine. I would just ask that in the entity name, you would just say, school district name, nutritional services, or something to that effect, so that we know that that was specifically what that partnership was or what that service was that's provided. So we know kind of what the context was around that.
Yeah. Tony, a good question about braiding the 21st Century Community Learning Center funds. Do we need to complete a 21st Century Summer Learning Report? Yes, you will. Yes, it goes with our federal reporting. So yes, apologies on that, but it's a federal funding stream. And we have specific requirements under those federal funds. Thanks for the question. Donnie asks, is the ask about transportation for students experiencing experiencing disabilities only account for students receiving specialized transportation?
Yes.
Oh, you already answered that. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. Katie, I think that answers it.
We're not going over reimbursement requirements here, but if you have any questions about the form, feel free to shoot us an email. We're happy to work through that with you.
Maria, is there a reason why on tab 3 for hours of programming that only line 45 and 47 are adding up? I tried to look at the formatting and it should be a total for lines 43 through 47, but the math is not correct. Let us take a look at that, Maria.
Yeah, and apologies, yeah, that might have been a mistake, but I will double check that and get back to you all on that.
Yep. And as always, if there are any issues with the form, reach out and we can help you. Christine, when we report FTE, our staff worked either 5.75 support staff or 6.5 hours daily licensed staff. Are we adding total hours and dividing by 8 hours for total FTE? Good question. Do we differentiate between licensed and classified staff on the form, Savannah?
We do. Yeah, we do. But I would say to go ahead and divide it by 8, so get the total FTE that way. So for consistency's sake, we're just asking that everyone report that way, as that can be a little bit clearer measure, I guess.
Okay. Some other clarification around FTE. Let's see, Lisa, one of my schools, oops, it just jumped here. One of my school's principals received a community partnership award. Should I include that in the success story? Yes, absolutely. We would love to hear about that. So please do, please do. Oh, Savannah, you already said absolutely. Okay, thank you. I included my question on reimbursement form. Do you need me to send it again?
For Cherie, the date on the reimbursement form is really just the day that you're submitting it. And that's just so that we can tell one form from another. It's not a really, oh, I'm sorry, for the actual, not for the claim date, yes. So if you have an expenditure that's incurred over a range of time, just put in the last date that expenditure was incurred. So if it's for staff time, you can put in the last day of instruction that the staff was actually working. Apologies. The deadline for the final report is November 14th.
Cherie said, okay with the last date? Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, let's go back to the slide deck, and please don't hesitate to come off mute if you have any other questions or clarifications. Okay, let's move to looking forward, summer 2026. So ODE has been very busy behind the scenes. As soon as we were able to launch grants, we shifted to a lot of public engagement looking towards 2026. And we've come up, and many of you know this, you've been in a lot of our engagement sessions. We've come up with a two-phase approach to rulemaking with our State Board of Education. And phase one is really about defining the grant award process and determining the grant length. We've heard over and over and over and over again that multi-year funding is necessary for you to build and deepen and plan. And all of our efforts are focused on that right now. We're right in the middle. We did our first read with the State Board of Education for rules. I think it was last week, and then we'll be up in front of the State Board again on October 16th to pass permanent rules. We're doing that now because we want to get ahead of this so that you all will know about grants in the winter to give you enough planning time. And then after that, we know that we will have multi-years. So recommendations from all partners, stakeholders is like grants between 3 and 5 years are optimal. So more to come on all of that. Then we'll go into a phase two where we have comprehensive policy development that takes a little bit longer and we want to do durable, right policies. So we're going to form an expanded learning advisory committee, and we'll take on topics like program quality indicators, evaluation, partnerships, professional development, and further define that within this grant. So all of that work will start in 2026. So we're still moving. We're still working really hard behind the scenes to get this structured and set up for the future. So let's go to the next slide. So this is how we are imagining the grant award process for 2026. This process is more aligned to the intent of the legislation. And we have another slide we probably should have added here, but we can share that again. But the idea is the step one would look a lot like the way you saw the rank order for this grant in 2025. You would see a list of rank order of eligible entities by ELA proficiency rates, and then we will assign some priority points to that. So you'll see your entity and priority points based upon students not yet at reading proficiency or proficiency in literacy. And the high need entities will rise to the top of that list. Then step two, all eligible entities will be able to submit an application. So this is different. We heard, hey, hold on, we're eligible entities, but why aren't we able to submit a grant? So this will allow all eligible entities to submit a grant. And now that includes charters, ESDs, tribes, and school districts. Applications will include a budget. We heard loud and clear that that y'all wanted right-sized awards aligned to your local context and your local needs. So you'll be able to write your budget and request an amount along with your application. So you'll get some priority points up front. You'll submit an application, and then we'll have a peer review panel that will assess the quality of applications, and that will look more like a competitive grant. So we're trying to get the best of both worlds, right? So a little bit of the formula piece with the priority points, and then also so that all eligible entities have access. The good news is there is a lot of demand for this grant. There are many people that really want summer learning programs. So we feel like this is a fair way to get that out the door. So then final application score will include priority points and then application points. And then we will award grants up to that $35 million mark. And we believe with the prioritization, with the application, and then the review that we will have efficient, effective, and equitable awards. So that's what we're thinking right now. We're going through the rulemaking process. Continue if you have questions or insights on that, feel free to reach out to us. We value those that are administrative, and we value all voices. And we know you have lived this for multiple years. So we do greatly value and listen to and try to adjust our guidance to better serve you and support these programs. So let's go to the next slide. How we engage. So you can see here, I think we're at our time, but this is just some of our engagement sessions. We had 3 big public sessions plus 5 targeted sessions and included all of these stakeholders. And we're also trying to connect and build with our broader initiatives at ODE, House Bill 3198, our Education Accountability Initiative, and then all of the efforts from summer 2024 from our House Bill 4082 work group as well. Let's go to the next slide.
And I'm going to skip forward. It's
Yeah.
in there. It's just the key takeaways, which we kind of already went over. But here's as well our contact information, our Fit Southern Grant webpage link, and then finally just a few more pictures from programs this summer.
Yeah, and our gratitude for your time today. We know you're all very, very busy people juggling a lot. So deep thanks, and we look forward to seeing you soon.